Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Facts and Fatherhood podcast. I am your guest, not your guest. I am your host. I have a guest, but I'm your host. We're going to leave that right there in there. I am your host of this Facts and Fatherhood podcast, and I am grateful to be able to be back with you again for another episode. And as always, I know you're really going to get a whole lot out of this discussion. I have a really great guest that's going to be in the studio with me today, and I'm looking forward to meeting him. But first, you already do me a huge favor. I'm going to need you to like and share and subscribe to my channel. All right. There are all the little socials right there, YouTube and Instagram and TikTok and all the things. You can go right there to the website. I want you to check that web out. There's some good stuff that's over there that is for this journey here on the Facts and Fatherhood podcast. You can even scan this right there. Some really good tools that I really want you to be able to get your hands on. And I just want you just to get involved. All right. I want you even to share this podcast with somebody. Let somebody know that, hey, Facts and Fatherhood is on the air and you want to get in. You want to be a part of it. Okay. So do that. Do me a favor, like and share. Don't forget exciting news. As we get a little bit closer to Father's Day, this little wonderful tool right here is going to be available for you to get in your hands. All right. This is my new book that's coming out. Father's Day will be the specific once we get all those details, but I want you to make sure that you get ready to order this book like arrows in my hand. Okay. You will not be disappointed that you got that tool. All right. It's going to be available there on the website as well. And then when you go over to that website, y'all, we have some really cool stuff. I remember I told you that I wanted to do something to honor and appreciate the memory of my dad who's gone on. And so we get a lot of our merchandise around some of the statements that you say quite often. And one of his favorite phrases that he would say quite often to make you really think about what you were doing was, boy, don't let the devil fool you. So we got some hoodies, we got some t-shirts, we got some caps, we got some cups, all kind of different things. Some of them say boy. We even have some of them that say girl, don't let the devil fool you. One of them says, hey, don't let them. One says, bruh. Don't let the devil fool you. Whoever you are, however you want to address that, just don't let the devil fool you. And we're all trying to grow in fatherhood. So one of the things we also have available that I'm excited about is this fatherhood journal, right? You can really kind of journal and chronicle your journey as you are growing and as you're developing as a father. And as you read through the book that's going to be made available, you can actually kind of make some notes, to just really kind of help yourself develop. So excited for all those things that are coming down the pike. Y'all know that I always tell you on every single episode, my goal, my number one goal is to help you as a father, no matter what stage of fatherhood you're in, to help you love being a father the way that I love being a father, and to inspire and to encourage and to just promote the reality of great fatherhood all over the place. All right. So listen, I am excited today that we have in our show a very special guest. And he's going to tell you a little bit more about himself. I like to allow him to be able to tell you about who he is and about what he does. But I want you at this particular point in time to welcome to the studio, Mr. Chris Rogers. All right, everybody, let's welcome him in, man. It's good to have you and being a part of our studio today and have you in, man. I'm so glad you. How are you doing?
Bro, I need to cop one of those hoodies. Man, that's straight up. Like I got him getting one of those hoodies at the end of this call, no doubt. Bro, don't let no, boy, don't let the devil fool you. I love that. So good.
Yeah, that
Beyond,
was one of the things my dad used to say quite often.
I love it. I love it. But beyond that, so
Yeah,
yeah,
so I'm so glad to have you, man.
absolutely, absolutely. So
Yeah,
for
go
those
ahead. I'm
listening,
so glad to have you in, man. But go ahead, talk to me.
yeah, brother. So my name is Chris Rogers. Like what was alluded to earlier, I am the head coach of what's called the Rebooted Teen Program, which we're going to talk about today. Basically, what we talk about and what I do is surrounding something that has a lot of stigma attached to it. And as soon as I say the word, there's going to be a lot of queasy feelings that come up. So just full transparency, we're going to be talking about some mature themes and things that might have some, warning signs around it, right? But it's something that exists. And the more we sweep it under the rug, the more the stigma will continue to be a thing, right? What we talk about is the issue of pornography. Now, what I have available for anybody who's curious when it comes to being able to recover if they happen to have a compulsion in their own life, but also have a child who's struggling with this type of behavior and don't really feel equipped on how to lead a lot of these conversations as far as how to get them started. Because understandably so, someone out there might be feeling a little awkward, right? Might be feeling a little uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to ruffle feathers. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want to come off as weird, right? These are all real and valid thoughts and feelings. What I've done is I have also put together a free program for parents and guardians called the Rebooted Teen Parent Program, where I break it all down for you. From my experience, both as a coach and as someone who has lived some life when it comes to behaviors in this particular sexually compulsive world, you name the thing, I've done the thing. I've been there. And having been there myself, I know what it's like to make it out through being in a program myself, through finding a community that was non judgmental and shame free, and using my skill set as a teacher. I've worked as a music teacher for the better part of a decade in New York City, where I'm from, and taking that experience and skill set and applying it to this world is what I've done and what I'm very excited to share about. So, for anybody who might be curious as far as how they can get started, as far as started these conversations with their kids, check out the Rebooted Teen Parent Program at rebootedteen.com. And we're here to talk about children. We're here to talk about parenthood. And we're to talk about, the ins and outs of the internet, what to expect, what to look out for, but ultimately know that there is no reason to fear, that there's hope, there's community. And I'm excited to be here. Let's get into it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. I feel like this is one of the most important subject matters I think that we can cover, that we can talk about right now. Um, I mean, just me thinking back on, I'm not gonna date myself, but just me thinking back on when I was growing up, right? Um, I'll say this. I still remember the television set that we had to kind of turn the little tuner in between the little knobs, just to kind of get the station. And then I remember there were times where we pretty much had to kind of be the antenna, for the television set. Before there was the advent of so much, remote control, and I remember when we thought like a universal remote control was probably one of the most coolest innovations in technology that ever came forth, right? But as time has gone on and technology has advanced and we move further, now we're in a space where, I mean, there is so many things, so much information. It's good in some ways, but there's so much information that is available to you at the tips of your fingers. It is available to computers, available to you through these devices here that everybody seems to just be so engaged with. And, we live in a day where everything is moving and parents have to have cell phones and children have to have cell phones and they have to have laptops to do homework and all this kind of stuff, but you got to have internet connections and all these things. And sometimes it means that it makes us a little bit tougher because of the technological age that we live in to kind of safeguard, and kind of guard those little young impressionable eyes and minds from things that they probably are not necessarily mature enough to really be able to handle. So this world is a whole lot different, and so that's why the subject matter is very, very important for us to be able to discuss and talk about. As we look at that, as a parent, who is raising children, my children thankfully are in adult age now, and they're about living their life. But as a parent who is raising those who are maybe preteen, I mean, because I know this kind of even touches outside of that teenage window, but who are preteen or maybe even teenagers, and they have to have access to these things and different types of technology and stuff like that. What do you suggest, or what do you say are some types of things that, as far as conversations, parents should begin to have with their children as they introduce them to this technology, or as they navigate this technological space?
I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, as far as where we're at in the modern era, as far as getting around goes, as far as being able to be in the know of what's going on in the world, having internet access will help you out in obviously that arena. And we can talk about, the social implications of having a phone or not having a phone. But as far as how to open up these types of conversations, certainly don't shy away from the fact that this is a tool, not a toy. One thing that I literally suggest to parents and guardians, because obviously if a child has a phone or an iPad, something like that, one of the first conversations to have, if you purchase that device for your child to have, that is yours. So the conversation is to be led with, this is mine. I paid for it, which means it's my property. I am letting you hold it and use it. So starting off with the expectation there. It's not a matter of an invasion of privacy. It's a matter of instilling a sense of responsibility earlier as opposed to later, So, a device with this kind of caliber and this kind of access to the planet without a sense of expectation and responsibility, it's like kind of playing a game of football without boundaries. It's just like anything goes, right? So we're talking about standards right from the get-go. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah. That's important. That's extremely important. I remember when we were preparing at the time, because our children were able to get into their high school careers, and we were getting ready to have all. So we had football, baseball, we had track, we had volleyball, and softball, and all these different things, right, going on. And so you gotta be able to stay. You gotta be able to maintain contact, right? I've got to be able to call and say, hey, where are you? We got to, be able to coordinate and, pick people up and schedule and all the things, right? And you want your child to actually be able to, contact you. So as we were preparing to introduce them to having the responsibility, I really like that, how you talked about it's important to go ahead and set the expectation. Like, I want you to understand, right? Mom and dad are paying the bill for this device. So since we're paying the bill for this device, in order for you to this device, the way I'm going to incentivize ability to keep this device is that you manage it according to what our expectation is, right? And so we of course had some monitoring software kind of parents, and we had screen time, and
mhm.
we knew that there was nothing that anybody needed their cell phone at that particular age for after a certain time of the night, of the evening. And we want you all to get plenty of rest. So everybody's phone is going to go on the mantle in the living room, and we're going to put it on the charger, and that is where it's going to rest for the night. because I'm interested and curious as to how sometimes allowing that access with a young, impressionable, immature mind, and then just all of this idle time and all of this idle space that just creates this opportunity that exists. Um,
Sure.
and of course, I want to say this: we're not I would not be found guilty of trying to tell anyone how to parent. Our goal is just to really provide you with some tools to assist you, in understanding that this is a funny space to navigate. I mean, there's some pitfalls, there's some if I can use that terminology, some wormholes, some all kinds of different things that can pull, that young impressionable mind into certain directions, and the graphics and all the sort of things that are utilized as tools to kind of draw and pull you in. I mean, they can, before you know it, be easily sucked into this thing. And here's the thing: when that happens, sometimes there's a disconnect. You know, there's not a connect between the parent and the child. And I know in those teen years, I can tell you that in those teen years, as a parent, you become what is probably the least smartest person to ever exist on the planet. So now, a lot of what you say, you taught them everything, just about everything they know at this point, but now all of a sudden you're just not as smart. How can we bridge those gaps, and make those connects where they feel comfortable conversations about maybe they saw something they shouldn't have seen.
There's a term that I used oftentimes with clients, and that term is that culture of curiosity. And in the most ideal and healthy of circumstances, that's something that's made a priority in the home. That's something that's made a priority in conversations. So, when we're parents and guardians, it's like, the older the child gets, the dumber we end up becoming, right? Mom and dad just don't understand. I was there as a teenager. Who else, right? Now, that culture of curiosity, here's a practical example of what that looks like, right? So one of the things that we can start to do is there's something that I like to call the advice monster. Like when we start to go into lecture mode with all the best intentions in the world, it's like, yo, this is how the thing works, right? I've seen this movie before. I've lived some life, young one. Like, this is how it works. Control the advice monster for a second. There's a time and place, but start the habit of asking questions. What do you already know about this type of situation? Like, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? As they're growing in confidence, it's like, all right, I'm getting a feel of this life thing. There is the balance between, letting, the confidence get to their head, and, having them be totally, you know what I'm saying? Like, there needs to be a balance. So the point is, ask questions. Like, what do you think about this? Like, what are you feeling? Like, what's going on internally to the point where it's affecting you externally? We dive into how that all works in the Rebooted Teen Parent Program, but the moral of the story is instill that culture of curiosity. Because when it comes to making types of choices that are based on those standards and values, that needs to be demonstrated. It's not so much hands-off parenting. It's still a game of monkey see, monkey do. It's okay. How do I go about thinking before I speak? How do I go about, like thinking before I make a decision? It's not a matter of us as parents, dads, moms, parents, right, being perfect, but it's a matter of they're still watching, they still want to know that they can put their trust in you. All they're looking to know at that point, as they're learning more about themselves, as they're moving about, starting the baby steps of making their own choices for their life. I mean, we decided what we wanted to do in college when we were 16. It's like, there's this hilarious line I used in this musical called Passing Strange, and one of the lines, the main character, kind of breaks the fourth wall and speaks to the audience. It was like, that funny moment when you realize that most of your adult life was based on a decision made by a teenager. They're starting to get hip to how the world works and what they actually want. And when they're challenging you, when they're questioning your authority, it's a test. They want to know that they can depend on you. That's not an excuse to let them run their mouth and let them run amok, right? Boundaries and standards, but know that that's what that is. So if there's like, we can, dive into some of that, but the culture of curiosity, give them the blueprint so that they can fill it out on their own. It gets to a matter of like, in their early childhood, you teach them how to walk. And then once they learn how to walk, then you run with them for a while, right? And then once they're running on their own, show them different places where they can run. You can run on the track. You can run on the soccer field. You can run on the basketball court, And then if they fall, you teach them how to tend to their wounds. You show them how to put on a Band-Aid. But through enough reps, they're able to do it on their own. It's a matter of slowly but surely, here's the blueprint. Here is everything that you've been taught. Now it's a matter of giving them the pen so that way they can fill it out on their own. And really, what we dive into in the Rebooted Teen program is we start that process. What is it that's important to you? We're not here just to talk about how to change your behaviors. We're here to solidify the foundation for who you want to be for the rest of your life. And making your decisions based on those values. Like you said earlier, I can't tell anyone how to be a parent. It's not my role to tell you this is how you should live. That's not what I'm about. But what I am about is holding you accountable to what you say you want to do. So let's say, in the types of conversations I would have with clients, when we're talking about things like social media, porn, relationships, things like that. It's not a matter of you do this, you did, give them like a checklist of action steps. It's a matter of before we get there, what do you want? What is important to you? We can talk about filters on devices. We can talk about standards with technology. That's a place to start. But once the child perhaps is out of the home, once they get off to college, right? Once they are kind of free range and they're left both figuratively and literally to their own devices, do they have the muscle memory and the training to be able to make those value-informed decisions as opposed to acting impulsively? It's not a matter of being perfect. It's that foundation to fall back on. So it all starts, I know I'm really going off right now, but it all starts with that culture of curiosity. The training starts with having them answer questions so that way they learn the value of asking themselves questions. Where is this feeling coming from? When's the first time I felt this way? What is it that I want? And will making this kind of choice lead me closer or further away from that? Again, in this stage in their development, it's an explosive time that we all know about well and good. But with the proper facilitation and with that shame-free support, far from impossible. So to finally answer your question,
Yeah.
I'm so excited about this, but it starts with that culture of curiosity.
I love it. So, and I like that because what you're doing is one of the things I found as I learned to never tell my child to shut up. Right? Just shut up. Stop talking to me. I learned because what I learned is when I do that, I'm doing a lot of things in a moment that I don't realize that I may be doing. One, I'm training you not to talk to me, right? Because there's going to come a point in time where I do want to engage in the conversation and exchange with you. But if I've taught you not to talk to me, that's going to be just, that association with me is always going to be, oh, well, he's just going to tell me to shut up anyway. He's going to tell me, so basically you're telling me that what I have to say, my input is not important, right? And unless, it's important now because it serves a purpose. I think sometimes we forget that our children are people,
Wow.
and every person has the same basic needs, right? And as a person, every human being, among some of our basic needs, two main ones is to be heard and understood. So if I'm teaching you that I don't want to hear and I don't want to understand you, perhaps you could probably get locked into some devices that is like, you don't want to understand and you don't want to hear me anyway. So like, why should I talk? So I really the concept of creating a culture of curiosity, which means I need to show you that I'm interested in you as a person, right?
Mm-hmm.
I need to show you because one of the things I believe when it comes to teaching and training, I do not believe in the old adage of do as I say and not as I do. It is baloney. It is just not, that's not it, right? Because I believe that if I'm teaching and training is a combination, I keep saying this, of demonstration and articulation. If I'm articulating, but I'm not demonstrating, I'm not teaching, I'm not training, right? If I'm demonstrating, but not articulating, I'm not telling you what I'm doing or showing what I'm still missing the boat there, right? So there's got to be a consistency in the group. And with me being the teacher, I've got to be that person that shows you by example, right? Because one of the things I'm loving about understanding this culture of curiosity is also within that having transparency myself, right? And I did things with my children when some baby, my response in the moment was probably, not the best response. Maybe I kind of was a little too, at the moment, in my expression, and I just needed it to be done right then. Um, I found myself saying, I would go to my children, I would tell them this. I think this was one of the moments I think I had with my children. I said, guys, sometimes I need you to understand, mom and I, sometimes we don't get along, right? Now that was already, like earth shattering right there. But the next part was, I'm going to commit this to you. If I need you to understand that although we're wrong, the reason why we're wrong sometimes is because we're human. But I need you to understand, again, creating those boundaries, is I need you to understand it's never your place to try to correct me if I'm wrong. But I need you to understand that when I recognize I'm wrong, I am going to come and self-correct, which means I am going to come and apologize to you and say, hey, I was a little bit with that. I was a little bit tired and perhaps my response was not exactly what it needed to be. But I just wanted to kind of, apologize to you because I didn't want to, create a thing. In that way, I'm not giving up any, authority or giving up any ground. I'm not making myself weak. I'm actually building a connection, right? Because everybody can relate to being imperfect. They all are. And so I need them to understand what it looks like to recover from or to demonstrate, right? To articulate and demonstrate what self-correction and accountability looks like whenever you fall short of whatever the expectation should be, right? I think that
Mm.
is so pivotal and so important. So I think it's important that we do that we remain in that space where we do approach things from a level of curiosity and understand that there's a level of curiosity they have about us too, and they need to see us outside of, you know, never make a mistake, get everything right, blah blah blah. They need to see us outside of that because I think that will probably create a space of connection as well, and that we always are in a space where we stay curious. One of the things I appreciate right now about the relationship I have with my children is that we can talk, right? We can have conversations, you know.
Good.
We can talk about things, the stuff the children. I said, hey, when something goes wrong, you make a mistake, you come, we're gonna talk about it. Being disappointed, we already get that. You already know I was disappointed when everything was coming out, right? I don't want to have a conversation about my disappointment. I want to have a
Mm,
conversation about what have you learned, you know, through this process. What are you getting out of this process? You know, what are you gonna do differently? You know, as you approach to go forward. And then I want to make sure that I end that with you have my vote of confidence that I know, you know, that you're actually going to be able to do what you need to do. You're actually going to be able to move past this point with the lesson that you've learned. And, you know, dad has full confidence in you, you know, that you're going to be able to move and grow past this. Right. And so I love that, you know, really creating that environment of, hey, you know, I'm not hammering down on you as a person who is perfect. I'm coming to you and leveling with you to say, hey, you know what? I've been there too. I've made my errors. I've made my mistakes. This is what I had to do to correct it. So I'm actually not asking you to do anything that I've not demonstrated to you, you know, that needs to be done. And
exactly.
so I think that's very, very crucial, very important. So I really like that uh, about creating that culture of curiosity. Well, when we look at this, what are some of the signs that you know parents should be looking for um, whenever maybe there's some engagement, and again, maybe there's not that connection that's there. Maybe there is not the ability to talk. What are some things that it's kind of be a twofold question. What are some things that parents should be looking for, you know, as kind of signs maybe this behavior activity is going on? What types of ways they can investigate or signs they can look for? And then how is it important if you don't have that connection to bring someone else in who ate it?
My goodness. Well, starting with some certain things that parents and parents can look out for. At least, just some signs that there might be an opportunity for a conversation. If we see a red flag, it's no reason to necessarily sound all the alarms, emergency, emergency. It's just an opportunity for a conversation. Seems like as good a time as any, right? Some of the first things that come to mind include, some of
Uh-huh.
the technological things that you might discover. So, first things first, do you find that there is a new increased sense of secrecy around one's device? Don't touch my phone, don't look at my stuff, right? Again, it's not a matter of like, oh, my antenna is jiggling, mom senses are tingling, dad senses are tingling. It's a matter of opening up a conversation. It's an opportunity. I notice you've been kind of like more secretive of your device. How are you feeling? Not what are you doing? It's just like, how are you feeling? Check with them first. It's not you versus your child. It's you and your child together versus the problem. We'll dive into that, I'm sure, a little bit later. But, some of those technological things. Do they have multiple apps for sending and receiving video messages and things like that? Multiple apps, perhaps for, blocking internet history or things like that. Just be aware of what's going on your child's device. Again, if you got it for them, that's yours. You're just letting them hold it. So it's a matter of what's going on their device. So those are some technological things. Some social cues that might be a reason for opening up a conversation include if there is an increased sense of maybe anxiety or shame or shutting down, pessimism when it comes to conversations about things like relationships, conversations about things like sex, or conversations about things like the internet. If you kind of socially sniff some shame coming from them, it's like their vibe kind of changes. Again, it's just an opportunity to perhaps open up a conversation. You know, do they somehow, or do they suddenly value more time spent alone? Is there, again, a changed attitude when it comes to, again, like the sense of maybe something like marriage, right? Like that's a big one. It's like, oh, if there's a sense of cynicism behind something like that. If you notice something like that, again, if your parental antenna is starting to wiggle a little bit, again, it's not that all the red flags exist, it's just opening up a conversation. So, beyond some of the basic things, like if we're still, using like a family computer, like, check the internet history. If you see a couple suggestive things, it's like, okay, there we go. They're learning or they're discovering certain things. Again, an opportunity for a conversation. Yeah, I mean, those are some of the first few cues that come to
Mm-hmm.
mind. But just to backpedal just a little bit, I love the way you
Okay.
articulated the difference between the articulation and the demonstration, which is really, really key. I would go as far as saying
Mm-hmm.
within this particular realm, when it comes to the topic of pornography, especially for dads, especially for fathers, because odds are pretty darn high that if you are a man in this day and age, the odds are pretty high that you have some sort of history of exposure, or maybe compulsion yourself when it comes to, some sort of sexually compulsive behavior. It's very, very common. So there is that understandable, again, I want you to do as I say, not as I do. Sometimes when we open up those types of conversations, it does matter in terms of our demeanor, how we present these types of things. If you present something in a shameful way, they're going to receive it that way. If you present something in an awkward, this is kind of like a hush hush type of thing way, they're going to receive it that way. You know, what we talk
Mm.
about in the teen parent program is that, look, sex exists, porn exists, these are things that are a part of life. These are things that are a part of culture. We can't just pretend that they're not a part of life forever. We can only put on that mask, so to speak, for so long, especially when they are developing mentally, when they're developing physically, when they're developing emotionally. They're going to have feelings and things that pop up that didn't happen when they were 5 or 6. But now that they're 12, 13, 14, they're going to pop up. Questions are going to happen. Feelings are going to occur. So, in many ways, you are a product of your preparation. So, how do you prepare for those types of conversations? Well, one, understand the target. What's the objective here? Again, like I said before, it's not you versus your child. They are not the enemy. It's you and your child together versus the problem. Like you had alluded to earlier at the beginning of the conversation,
Mm-hmm.
when we're talking about porn exposure, I mean, listen, culturally speaking, I mean, the age of exposure is getting younger and younger. So as soon as you think that, oh, my child hasn't been exposed to that, they're not messing around with that. Statistically speaking, they are. They might not know what it is yet. They might not have that compulsive
Mm-hmm.
feature with it yet. But as far as exposure goes, it is getting younger and younger. That's just the reality. So it is very, very important to have these sort of shame free, not weird conversations. We've all heard the story of the stork, right? We've all heard the birds and the bees, right? It's just like, listen, this is what this is. Your body parts have names. Let's just call them that, right? It's just like, this is what to expect, especially as a father. It's just like, listen, I know what this is. Sex is over here, porn is over here. They have similarities, but they are not the same. Why do we call it adult content? Because at a child's stage of development, they're not prepared for this level of stimulation. they're associating this sense of pleasure and excitement with something that they don't quite understand. You know, they haven't had any exposure to conversations about things like consent, right? About things like context, meaning like sex has a time and a place, right? It's not the expectation when you go into a relationship. There's more that happens. But again, when all you're seeing is a sexual act on a screen, you know, with all the different angles and all the different ways that they flash it up, that's all you know at that point. It becomes your first sex ed teacher, which is all the more important in the age of social media influencers, right? As their original influencer, their father, right? Their parent, whoever might be watching or listening right now, it's important to have these types of conversations earlier as opposed to later. Now, there might be a question, well, okay, cool. Well, when should I have those types of conversations? Well, again, if/when you happen to notice some of those potential red flags in both their device usage and just in the way that they're social, in the way that they interact about certain conversations, if they perhaps are asking questions that seem beyond their age, you know, if they are maybe exhibiting behaviors that seem beyond their age, you know, it's just, okay, there comes the opportunity to instill the culture of curiosity. You know, this is what we talk about on the program. But the moral of the story is meet your child where they're at. Like there's a story that I often tell of a cousin of mine. You know, they have a son, right? And apparently they found something weird on like I think they were like searching for like, you know, body parts on YouTube, right? And, you know, something very innocent, you know, but, you know, they know what I do for a living. They were like, can you talk to him? And I'm just like it's a family party. Like, now, you know? So I sit him down, right? We grab a table, grab a couple chairs, and I'm just like, hey, man, you know, I heard that, mom and dad were saying, like, you know, there were some things searched up in YouTube and stuff. You know, what's going on, you know? And, you know, there he is kind of sitting with his tail between his legs, like, oh, man, I did something bad. And I'm just like, listen, man, I'm checking in with you. This is about you. It's just me and you, Uncle Chris, right? That's all this is about. What's going on with you? And it was like, yeah, it was like porn and stuff. He's like 9, by the way. It was like porn and stuff. And I'm like, oh, okay. What is that? Straight up. Like almost playing dumb in a way just to be like, what do you know already? Again, contain the advice monster. Pull the reins. What do they already know, right? So I was like, what is that? So it was like, oh, okay, yeah, it's like sex and stuff. I'm like, okay, like, what is that? You know, what does that mean? What does that feel like to you? You know? And it ended up being like a really interesting conversation, seeing a 9-year-old's perspective on something like porn, on something like sex. It's just like, okay, like that's what you're feeling. Like it makes you feel like, you know, maybe a little anxious or excited, or maybe you don't know what you're feeling, and that's okay. The culture of curiosity, meet them where they're at. Pull the reins on the advice horse or monster. I like saying monster. The advice monster, right? What do you already know? Where are you at? You know, instilling that blueprint so that over time, they can eventually become an expert at themselves. You know, they can exhibit that sense of self-control, but self-control doesn't happen without self-awareness. That's the piece of the puzzle that needs to be instilled early. And that's where that culture of curiosity comes from. If you want a self-regulated child, they must be first self-aware. But again, that must first be not just articulated, but like you said, demonstrated. Oh, did I lose you?
So such yeah, I feel like this is such pivotal information
Mm.
that that I think is it will serve us really, really well. Because I, one of the things I'm hearing that, while you're talking is I'm really hearing by being composed just in a different way, right? So me exercising will actually help inform them, in this process as well. So I think that's very, very key, very, very key. So tell us where do we need to go to access this rebooted team program? Where do we go? Where do we go? Social media? Where do we go to your website? Those things. Point us in the direction of where we need to go to get our hands on those resources.
Absolutely. So, for anybody out there who might be listening, again, if you're a father figure, perhaps, right? And you feel like you know a young person who is struggling with this kind of behavior, and you don't know how to address it, or you feel ill equipped. This is where working with a coach can come into play. Like we both said at the beginning of the conversation, it's not our role to tell you how to run your household, right? That's not what this is about. We're not going to teach you how to play the game, but all the best athletes have coaches, right? So that way they can play the game that they play even better, right? So what you can do is go to rebootedteen.com, and that's where you can find the free resources. Start there at the Rebooted Teen Parent Program. Check it out, and everything that you've heard in this conversation can all be mapped out in a series of modules. The longest one is about 6 minutes, so they're really bite-sized, straight to the point, giving you what you need. And again, giving you the verbiage, like giving you the vocabulary to use, giving you some things to think about and consider when you're opening up those conversations. And yeah, give you what you need to get yourself started, for both yourself and your child. There's a Facebook group where a bunch
I
of us
love
are
it.
all trading notes in there and everything. And if you feel that you're getting a lot of value from this, and if you feel like the Rebooted Teen program is the right move for your child, you can find a link there and we can hop on a call and we'll talk it out. My DMs are open. You can find me at Rebooted Teen on Instagram. And there's plenty of samples from what you can find on the program there. But beyond that, that's where you can find me. And I really appreciate you facilitating this platform. I think it's really important for dads to, get some perspective, both from, because, we come from, the same faith, right? But sometimes we can find ourselves, like, how do we go about applying this? It's like, faith without works is dead, as we know, right? Shout out to James. It's about like, what can we do to take our faith and put it into practice? And what are some resources I can utilize that are healthy, not just for my, my fatherhood, but for my soul? We're trying to, yes, instill that culture of curiosity, but why? To choose peace over chaos. It runs deeper than just the behavior. It's where is that behavior coming from? A big part of compulsive behaviors, and I'll wrap it up here, it's not the thing. We can talk about substances, we can talk about behaviors. It's not just the thing, it's the place from which it's coming from. What's that inner magnet that's kind of like bringing you closer toward that substance behavior, that particular thing that you've become compulsively addicted to? It's that thing. That's the thing that through this program we can help you learn how to become more curious about and keep that as the target. It's not you versus your child. It's both of you together versus that inner thing, whatever it happens to be. So again, my name is Chris Rogers, rebootedteen.com to get yourself started. And once again, Demetrius, I really appreciate the platform and the opportunity to speak with you.
Fun. Have you on really, really good because I really feel like a lot of parents are probably stuck here. You know, um, how to address it. They don't know how to approach it, how to start the conversation even. And so I'm hoping to be helpful and beneficial to those who may process, for those who are trying to figure it out and trying to understand it. Listen, best things to learn was, to be honest with myself, and recognize where I needed help, recognize where I needed development, recognize where I could learn and where I could grow, recognize where I could find the tools that were essential and necessary, right? I feel like, I do a lot of my own car repairs. And one of the things I know from doing most of my own car repairs is knowing what handle, and when it gets to repair that I can't necessarily handle, I'm gonna take that bad boy to the professional. But if it's a lot of things I can do, but in order for me to even be able to do the jobs I can do on my car, I have to have the tools, right? So I invest in the tools that are necessary, for me to be able to the need to be able to effectively do the job that I have. So this is another tool that's been made available, and sometimes it's a good thing, you know. In this case, this is a tool that's being made available where your initial investment is just the time to learn, to understand it, to read through it, to put it into practice. So I'm encouraging all of you out here who uh, in this particular, or probably suspect that you may be in this particular space, or probably want to be proactive to make sure when it comes to that point that you're equipped and you're prepared. I'm encouraging you to reach out and where you can get some guidance, where you can get some help, and get direction. All right. So listen, this has been fun. Thank you, Chris, for here on our podcast on Fact and do me a favor, share, subscribe, do all the things. Get somebody's information. Share this video with somebody that you know that may be in this particular scenario, in this particular situation, and let's help us be successful in this experience. Remember, one of the things that we say as men on this particular, as dads, is we are good men who are doing the best we can and working every day to make our best better. All right. So hopefully after this conversation and you actually was going to help you to do exactly that, make your best better. All right. I love being a dad. I want you to love being a dad. I want you to have everything you need to be successful in your role and your job being a dad. Thank you guys for joining us again here on the Facts and Fatherhood podcast. Again, let's appreciate our guest, Mr. Chris Rogers, out on his social media platform. Go check him out. Go check out the next time. All right.